the home front of World War II, what that looks like for the war effort, why that matters, why the home front of World War II is more significant to the long scope of American history than is anything that happens on a specific battlefield. So those of you like Jonathan Ramos who are weirdo war geeks, sorry, the home front matters more. Take 30 seconds to your partner. Why is this idea of the home front, what happens at home during the war, why does it matter? 30 seconds, go. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, minutes talk.
It's like
What happens?
so with the economic stability, there's no political stability.
What kind of things?
Think of it there. All right, stop you there. George, why? Cool, excellent, George. Scarlett, why?
It's like how you mentioned before in another unit, like if we don't have economic stability, therefore we don't have political stability nor social stability, so that will like determine our success in the war.
Without economic stability, you don't have political stability or social stability, and you don't have public support. Good. Why else does the home front matter, Eric?
Oh, it also gives opportunity for women to work.
Oh, okay. So people are going to work in jobs, maybe get us out of the depression at home during the war. Ventura, why else?
Kind of like what Eric said, just like...
Well, Eric already said that, so...
I mean, adding on to that.
That's better.
It's like more jobs, getting out of the depression, and also like being able to fight the war and like becoming stronger as a world power.
Okay, excellent. As an economic, right, world power, that's fair. Adrian, what else?
It shows the strength of our countries.
We're able to mass produce to support a mass war. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. I'll take one more. Terry. I will not take Terry. Let me get one from Wantes. What do you think? What else matters on the home? Why else does this home front matter? What's happening at home during the war? Josh, go ahead.
I'm not sure if it applies to this, but also like isolationism and like neutrality.
Sure, the fact that we're isolationist of all, like this is going to change our public opinion about getting involved in world affairs. Cool. Yeah, that works. So, yeah, battles are cool and they're fun, and Ramos wants to know how many people die at Iwo Jima and other places. But way more important is like what changes in American society. Now, what happens in every single war in American history? We can go a Civil War, we can go War of 1812, we can go the French Revolution, we can go World War I. What happens at home in every single war?
A lot of money is used.
A lot of money is used. Yeah, wars are freaking expensive. What else?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing goes up, sure. Disagreements over. Okay, and what does that result in? Disagreements over whether to join the war. What gets restricted in every single war? Civil liberties. Alien and Sedition Acts. Lincoln suspending habeas corpus. Lincoln suspending freedom of the press. Espionage and Sedition Acts, World War I. So in every single war, there is a restriction of civil liberties. But in every single war, there was also the chance for a marginalized group to rise up and contribute in a way they didn't contribute before. And to change their opportunities because of the opportunities that come with war. Civil War, African Americans serving in the military. World War I, African Americans leaving the South. Women working better jobs. So in every war, there is an example of people losing their civil liberties, but also a full group having new opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. World War II is no different. So your key concepts are as follows. The keys to focus on here is that our strong industrial base plays the pivotal role in winning the war. Right? Yeah, our soldiers are cool. Yeah, that's great. But the real reason the Allies win the war is the industrial capacity of the United States. The ability to turn every car factory into a tank factory. Every little commercial plane factory into a bomber plane factory. To change our entire industrial economy, that's already a huge economy, into a war economy. And down here, that mobilization at home, so getting to change our economy into a war economy, and military service provides opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise for women and minorities to better their lives because there is a war for them to serve in. Right? Way back in the day, we all went to Hamilton, and Hamilton said, I wish there was a war for me to fight and to prove immigrants' worth. That's true then for every war. I wish there was a war for us to help and to serve and to do this and that and to prove the worth of my whatever. African Americans, women, Mexican Americans, immigrants, so forth. So your prompt is here. Terry, read it for us. Not louder, Terry.
Evaluate the extent to which the home front experience during World War II expanded the freedom and opportunities available to Americans.
Cool. So we're going to say things like, despite limiting opportunities for Japanese people, since they're in camps, it expands opportunities for women, for African Americans, because such and such. All right, let's get cracking. We're short 5 minutes today for Student of the Month, so I'm going to go as quickly as possible. I finished one slide short in first period. I'll try to get through all of them today, but if not, we got 2 hours of fun tomorrow. We'll be good to go. So World War II is a full, total war that impacts every single part of U.S. society. The U.S. economy, huge impact. Socially, huge impact. Politically, huge impact. We get a third and a fourth term president, largely because of World War II. Big impact. FDR's big hope is that the U.S. would serve as this great arsenal of democracy. Now here we are at the point of the school year where I get to reference that awful video from the first day, where Jerry Seinfeld's trying to explain to them, what does he mean, the arsenal of democracy? And nobody knows, right? You guys remember that video? Germany, right? And don't say France. Yeah, which just means we're going to be the side that is funding and supplying and battleshipping and planning the spread of democracy. And we'll go a little more into this tomorrow, but it's important that we note that World War II is as much of an ideological struggle between fascism and totalitarianism and militarism versus democracy as it is Germany versus the U.S. Right? It's a struggle of ideas, of what's going to reign supreme in the world. And that struggle of ideas is going to translate right into the Cold War as well. Once we defeat totalitarianism and fascism, the next conflict becomes capitalism versus communism. This big conflict over who's going to rule the world. All right. It's important that we note that the boost of wartime industry, this increase in U.S. industrial capacity and spending, is what ends the Great Depression. The Great Depression is over by 1939. The U.S. isn't in World War II until 1941. But the Depression is over because of, like I told you guys Monday, that Lend-Lease Act, cash and carry policy. We're funding the war. We're supplying the war before we're ever in the war, and that reduces unemployment and the Depression's over. And the war really does change the lives of women, African Americans, Mexican Americans to a more positive extent, Japanese Americans to a largely negative extent. Cool. So the big continuity here is the growth of government. Since the turn of the century, our government has been growing in size. The progressive movement, I showed you a growth in the size of government employees and bureaucracies. This new progressive movement asks for new regulations. New regulations require new agencies. New agencies require new employees. Government grows. New Deal, government grows more. World War II, government grows most. It's the biggest our government's ever been in size, largely because of this War Powers Act that really does give FDR unprecedented amounts of power, unprecedented amounts of authority, and all those critiques of him being dictatorial during the New Deal, we all kind of forget those because there's a war to fight. Oh my God, he's controlling the economy. Oh, there's a war? Let him control the economy. Oh my God, he's telling companies what they can produce and not produce? That's dictatorial. Oh, there's a war? Have at it. So a lot of those critiques of FDR that he's being too controlling of things during the New Deal, those powers are then just given to him by the War Powers Act. It's kind of funny. Because everything's justified when you're fighting a war, apparently. We give FDR the power to create new government agencies, to censor the press, to limit civil liberties. Why? Because it wouldn't be a war without limiting civil liberties. And to seize personal property, especially from dangerous groups like those terrible, awful, dangerous Japanese. New agencies are formed. New government agencies and bureaucracies are formed to fix the economy, to control the economy, to sell propaganda, to sell war bonds that will pay for the war, and to keep the enemy countries from getting involved in ours. Again, a lot of this is very, at least 1 and 2, are very New Deal-esque. Was the government controlling the economy to the New Deal? Yeah. Was the government using propaganda to sell New Deal programs? Yeah, we looked at them. So a lot of the things we do in the New Deal actually translate really nicely to World War II. Just ramp them up a little bit. The 3 agencies you should know are the Office of War Information, which does that. It spreads information about the war. Directs press, it directs print, it directs radio ads, it pushes propaganda, both in print and in video. Again, there's our key there is this idea of you can't win a war without what? Public support. All right, let's keep the public support up. We see the Office of War Mobilization, drafting people, controlling the economy, fixing consumer prices, making sure we have enough workers. And the Office of Strategic Services is working very hard to gather enemy intelligence, to spy on a lot of American citizens, but it's a war, so it's fine, to make sure that we're not going to get caught with our pants down again like we did during Pearl Harbor. But the key to really ending the Depression is right here. The U.S. government spends $250 million a day from Pearl Harbor to Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So for the 4 years we're in World War II, $250 million a day. Spent on production, spent on paying soldiers, spent on paying for supplies, spent on transportation, spent on everything. And that's how you end a depression, is spending $250 million a day. So just some real quick numbers to look at that prove my point. We looked a couple times last week at gross domestic product, how much the country's producing as a whole. We were at $130 billion in 1929 when the stock market crashed. As you guys should know, we get cut in half before FDR takes over. The $56 billion a year, just in terms of everything the country's producing all together added up in value. By 1940, before we are in the war, I mean, we're in the war, but we're not in the war. By 1940, we're right back to where we were in 1929. Proving my point that the Depression is over before we get involved in World War II militarily. By the time the war is over, we're up to $223 billion. So now we're more than double where we were before the Great Depression. We're back. And we're back, not just back, we're doubled. Our economy is booming. Unemployment by the end of World War II is down to 1%. Imagine being that one asshole who can't find a job in every 100 people, right? Like, dude, it's World War II. They're hiring freaking people with one arm to work in factories. You can't get a job? Because you're busy playing PS4. It's going to go flying? Yeah. You can get a job and go flying. The war costs a bunch of money. Our national debt skyrockets. But on the more positive side, our industry really fuels the win. But while it's fueling it, we double our production and our wages increase in industrial jobs. That's a big deal. People are making more money. Agriculturally speaking, we're feeding the war. Right? Europe can't grow crops. They're a little busy. Asia can't grow crops. They're a little busy. So we're the ones in our Midwest, which is really feeding the entire world during World War II, much like World War I, which kind of led to the Great Depression and so forth. We'll get into that later. But our farm value doubles, our farm income doubles. Everything is good economically speaking. And our labor unions also succeed because we really need our manufacturing capacity to be at full strength. So workers are treated well, working conditions are decent, wages go up, everybody is happy economically speaking. Here's some more graphs that just show us what I'm talking about. Here's our unemployment at its highest in 33. Gradually goes down. New Deal, remember the Roosevelt recession? When he cuts the Works Progress Administration, unemployment goes back up. Fortunately for Roosevelt, fortunately for the U.S., this is about the time we start that cash and carry policy and then the Lend-Lease Act, and now we're supplying the war, and therefore people are working, and it goes down from there. Look at this one, though. People are saving more money during World War II than ever before or ever since in American history. How much money people have in their savings accounts. People are saving money, which will actually bode very well for the 1950s when they have money to spend. Why are they saving money? Rationing. People can't spend money anyway because there's nothing to spend money on. You can't buy a car because that car factory is making tanks. You can't buy a radio because that radio factory is making radio equipment for planes. You can't buy anything, but you do have a job now. So it's a perfect storm of everybody's employed, nobody can spend money, everybody's saving their money, life is good. Life is good. Now, a lot of the money that's being made by civilians during World War II is being spent in war bonds. Now, I've gone over war bonds again, but I'm going to do it again because it's still very important. We'll use Ventura as an example. Now, Ventura has this awesome new job tightening the screws on an airplane. That's all he does. That's all he's qualified for. He has to use a big machine because his arms are very small. But he's going to tighten the screws on this airplane so the airplane is safe. Ventura's making some money. Can Ventura spend his money on consumer goods? Are there consumer goods to buy? No. So he's going to buy war bonds. I'm Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam Winchell. I will sell him a war bond for $25. In 10 years, he'll get paid back $30. Who wins? Both of us. He wins because he gets money later and he has money he can't spend now anyway. And I win as the government because now I can pay for the war effort. So war bonds make up almost 60% of how the U.S. pays for the war. $187 billion in war bonds are sold by the government, $25 at a time, $50 at a time, which then pays for the war effort, and now it becomes patriotic, as you can see, to buy as many bonds as you can afford. Scrounge up your savings, spend all that money, give it to the government, in 10 years you'll get it back. Yeah, right? Back them up. These poor soldiers got blood in the back and carnage. Back them up by buying extra war bonds. Here's more examples. We got Uncle Sam with his flag looking patriotic. He's pointing at you. Hey, buy war bonds for America. You in? Was I convincing enough? Yeah. All right, cool. There we go. And here we have the soldiers and the Air Force and the same idea. This is more of a fear piece of propaganda. Don't let that shadow touch them. Well, your poor children. How do you not make sure the Nazis don't come? Buy war bonds. Right? And then also, let's all back the attack, your bonds, buy ships. So it really creates this patriotism behind the simple act of giving the government $25 to go fight a war. Here's another way they sell war bonds.
On his chin, will soon be knocking at your door, and you ought to be in. The tall man with the high hat will be coming down your way. Get your savings out when you hear him shout, any bonds today? Come on and get 'em, folks. Come on, sit right up and get 'em. Any bonds today? Bonds of freedom, that's what I'm selling. Any bonds today? Scrape up the most you can. Here comes the freedom man, asking you to buy your share of freedom today. Money stands today. Give kiddies. When we blessed, we all invest in the USA. Sammy, my Uncle Sammy. Here comes the freedom man. He can't hand me tomorrow's plan. Not unless you buy your share of freedom today. Any stamps, any bonds today.
I know. We'll watch another one today. Tomorrow, excuse me. But the key there is the government has now taken over agencies as simple as animation studios to use them to push public opinion in favor of buying war bonds, anti-Japanese, anti-Nazi, and so forth. So the familiar characters are speaking to America in a way that I know Bugs Bunny, I trust Bugs Bunny, I watch Bugs Bunny once a week. And now he's telling me to buy war bonds? Sold. War bonds to buy. We also see a push for women and the home front to feed themselves. Stop buying vegetables. Grow your own vegetables. If you grow vegetables at your own house, what is that called?
Garden.
It's called a garden. What if instead we call it a victory garden?
Oh my God.
Now, not only is it a garden, it's a patriotic American garden. Grow some damn tomatoes and shut up. Support the troops. But that way, all of our mass-produced vegetables and wheat and corn can then be used to feed the world, our troops. And a ton of the home front push is seen via our propaganda. Now, this is a super important piece because it demonstrates one of the keys of public opinion for the war. Take 10 seconds with your partner. What is this cartoon trying to say? What is this cartoon trying to demonstrate? 10 seconds, chat it out. All right. Vargas, speak to me. What is this piece of propaganda trying to say?
So it's saying that in order to help the soldier, you have to make the gun first.
There we go. Who's more important in this scenario?
Both.
Yeah, both. Right? Whether you're fighting in the war or you're supporting it industrially speaking on the home front, everybody matters. That way, if I'm a soldier and Vargas is working in a factory, he feels that his job matters. Is he going to work harder that way? Yeah, I think my job matters as a teacher. So I work really hard, I don't question it. Right? But as a factory worker, a lot of times people were like, I just go to work and I use this freaking stupid machine. But now this stupid machine is fueling World War II. Your job is patriotic. So it increases output, increases morale, it increases public opinion. That matters. More examples of propaganda intended to increase morale on the home front for industrial workers. More production. Okay, cool. Done. Let's go. So that home front, which is pushing our industrial capacity, is super important. We see the Office of War Information also pushing people to shut the hell up. A lot of people are now working in factories that are now not involved in consumer stuff, but military stuff. That's great. I'm glad you're doing that work, but don't talk about it, because the enemy's always listening. Do your work, shut up. He's watching you. This rattlesnake that's bleeding from the mouth is less dangerous than careless talk. Don't talk about your work. Don't talk about what you're doing, because somebody might actually always be listening. Enemy ears are listening. Loose lips sink ships. I know. So even if you're something as stupid as, yeah, I'm working at a harbor, and yeah, the battleship, whatever, left for Europe today, well, don't talk about it, because why should anybody else know? It's the idea of work hard, but let your work do the talking. We see also a big push for censorship in war industries. This poor sailor is sinking, he's drowning, and he's pointing out and saying, someone talk. I don't want to talk, I don't want that guy to drown. That's messed up. This poor woman is wanted for murder. Why? What did she do? Her careless talk cost lives. So we see even like when soldiers are back home on leave. Right? 6 months in Europe, you come back for 2 weeks to catch your breath and get rest, or you go on leave somewhere in a safe part of Europe. Don't pick up a hooker and talk to her about what's happening, because you don't know who she's working for. There's a whole anti-STD push, anti-prostitution push in the soldiers as well, because you never know who's talking to who. And a bunch of the propaganda, of course, pushes fear. Right? Our homes are in danger when? Now. We got that guy coming from this side, we got that guy coming from this side, they're all coming towards the U.S. How do we solve it? Our job is to keep them firing. Keep going to work in that factory, keep working hard on those planes, whatever it is. Same thing here. this idea of appealing to your family. Don't let anything happen to your wife and kids. Go to work, make the damn plane, and shut up. We also see, unlike World War I, where it was suggested, not required, we see rationing in World War II. People are given ration books for how much food, how much fuel, how much flour, how much this, how much that they can use. Your fair weekly share, men, women, and children get that much, children that are there get that much, children of 6 get that much. You have to use a ration coupon to get your food. Once you're out, you're out. All right, we see, this is one of my favorites. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. George, what is that encouraging? Yes, but what's that encouraging? What does it mean to not ride alone? Go ahead.
I think it's encouraging people not to be like neutral on everything. Like if you're neutral, then you like.
You guys are overthinking it. Jesus, go. Carpooling. Yes, right? Don't waste gas by driving by yourself. That helps Hitler. I mean, it's a bold statement. It's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but here we are. Those are what the ration books look like, the coupons for what you can and can't have. And of course, they all have planes and tanks and things on them to make people feel like they're doing a good job. Now, the biggest factor to our victory is not our military, it's not our awesome generals, it's not our guns, it is our wartime economy and our production. The ability to outproduce Germany and outproduce Japan is the reason why we win World War II. That is all fueled by the War Production Board, which really regulates and controls all of the U.S. economy to make sure everybody is maximizing their production only for the war. And that's what enables us to outlast Germany and then defeat Japan, is because of production. They don't do a whole lot of cool documentaries or movies about factories. Right? They do Saving Private Ryan about D-Day and all these cool movies about the war part. All that's only possible because of production at home. There's 15 million U.S. soldiers fighting. That's a lot of soldiers, but there's 60 million people at home working directly in war industries. 4 times as many Americans are working in war industries as fighting the war. That's why they won World War II. Farmers as well, supplying them with supplies. The U.S. produces 2 times as much as Germany during the war and 5 times as much as Japan. That's how you win wars. The War Productions Board is very similar to World War I, actually, and the New Deal in terms of controlling production. But what happened when FDR tried to control production during the New Deal? What did the Supreme Court say?
They were like fond of it.
No, you can't do that. It's unconstitutional. You can't tell farmers what to grow. They ruled the AA unconstitutional. You can't tell companies what to produce. They ruled the NRA unconstitutional. But now it's a war. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. So pushing production, 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 production. America is the loser too when avoidable accidents stop production. Be careful at work. Over here. Is this your machine? It's your work machine. I don't know, it's some sort of industrial machine. Hitler's riding it. An idle machine is working for Hitler. Be on the job. No days off. Here's a Ford factory in Willow Run. They used to produce cars, and here they are producing planes. Just like that. You take a car factory, it becomes a plane factory. By the end of the war, Ford is making 1 giant bomber every single hour. Per factory. That's impressive. So now it was pumping out cars on the line, it's just plane, 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 plane. And Germany can't do that because a lot of their industrial capacity is being destroyed by the war. Japan can't do that because they don't have the men or the raw materials. The U.S. can because they have all of the above. For women, the job presents awesome opportunities that they would not have had otherwise. We see a huge rise in employment to 19 million workers in 1945. And this time it's not the young single women, it's married middle-aged women that are joining the workforce to, in a sense, replace their husbands who go off to war. In World War I, we don't see more women working, we just see women working in better jobs. In World War II, we see both. More women working and women working in better jobs. For the first time in a long time, women are entering what were considered male fields, working in factories, working in industry, working as pilots, working all kinds of cool jobs for women that they would not have had access to without World War II. What World War II does is it redefines the woman's sphere for a short time. Women will go right back to the home happily after World War II, but it does give women a taste of what life is like outside of the home in a male-dominated field. Of course, women only earn 65% of what men earn. Nice continuity there as well, but it is important that we demonstrate this change for women in World War II, that they are working out of the home in greater numbers. Here's some famous examples. Rosie the Riveter. A riveter is somebody that rivets. It's like tying together metal sheets in planes and so forth. That's why that's riveting and so forth. She's actually a real woman. They modeled this after somebody. She just died recently. Rosie the Riveter, we can do it. Demonstrated women, you can be feminine and attractive and look like a woman and also be strong working in the war industries. You can do both. It's important as we change this picture of what a woman is supposed to be. We also see propaganda aiming at women to do their job on the home front via farming, planting more stuff. Join the Women's Land Army, right? They're just going into mass areas and planting food to support the war efforts. Rationing as well. I'm going to be patriotic by not eating as much food. Cool. Everything's patriotic. Eat less. Grow more. Do this, do that. It's all for America. We see the Women's Army Corps working in factories and map making and this type of stuff that supports the war effort, as well as the Women's Army Air Corps pilots. Women working as pilots for the first time. Not like Army pilots fighting the war pilots, but transporting goods within the U.S., transporting soldiers within the U.S. Women make a huge dent on what's needed for World War II. Women are working in the WAVES program, which is the women accepted for volunteer emergency services. So women doing things like telegraphs and air traffic control and just facilitating the war effort on that front. And feeling like they are actually doing a part to impact World War II at home. Again, pro-women propaganda, showing how important they are in their jobs. She's working in packing parachutes. I'd rather have a woman pack my parachute anyway, because she's probably more careful. African Americans have another struggle ahead of them here as well. African Americans contribute greatly to World War I at home, at that first Great Migration, and then they were forgotten. So African Americans really step up in World War II and say, hell yeah, we'll support the hell out of this war effort, but don't expect us to get back into our seats afterwards. African Americans begin what's called the Double V campaign. Super important for the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement. Super important. The idea of the Double V is victory over fascism abroad. We'll go fight fascism for you, but we'll also be fighting for victory over discrimination and racism in the Jim Crow South at home. Okay, we're not going to go fight a war and then sit back and shut up again. This is a picture of A. Philip Randolph's march on Washington, attempting to protest wartime discrimination. It can be said that you shouldn't protest things during wartime because it's unpatriotic. I argue it's the best time to protest things because the country needs you more than ever. Other important groups, you'll have a lot of acronyms for African American civil rights coming up. This is one of the first ones. CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. They're beginning, way before we see it reported in the textbooks, they're reporting things, they're doing sit-ins in restaurants in major cities, staging riots and demonstrations and walkouts, pushing for African American rights long before we would consider the civil rights movement, quote unquote, starting. All right, I'm going to go like 2 minutes into nutrition. Is that going to bother anybody? All right, get over it. Of course, with African Americans, they are serving in segregated units. We haven't gotten that far yet. But there are, unlike World War I, a great number of black soldiers serving in the actual war. The Tuskegee Airmen are a very famous example of African American pilots that gained great notoriety through World War II. And this is one of the first accomplishments of the civil rights movement is desegregating the military. Because if we can desegregate our soldiers, the rest of the world should fall. The rest of the country should fall in line. So 1.2 million African Americans serve, which is a lot. I told you this Tuskegee Airmen. I told you about the Double V campaign, but I didn't tell you about the Great Migration yet. We had our first Great Migration during World War I. That led to the Harlem Renaissance. Our second Great Migration is bigger and grander. It breaks sharecropping because so many African Americans leave the rural South for jobs in the North. It's the first time we start associating urban areas with African Americans because so many of them leave the South and settle in places like Detroit, Chicago, more in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco for industrial jobs. Of course, when that happens, it always leads to race riots. It happened in World War I. It's going to happen again in World War II, the most famous being in Detroit in 1943. Thanks to A. Philip Randolph's work with his March on Washington, FDR passes the Executive Order 8802, which does not desegregate the military, but it desegregates the national defense industry. So all these factories, all these agencies, all these bureaucracies, all this stuff that's supplying the war effort, that's the first thing that gets desegregated. Because society needs the African American contribution that much, they're willing to desegregate these factories, these things that are supplying the war effort. Big deal for African Americans. Big, big, big deal. And again, note this core, Congress of Racial Equality. This is one of the double V campaign, victory for democracy at home, victory for democracy abroad. So African Americans are like, how are we going to fight for democracy when we don't even get democracy? Here's some awesome pictures. Prison is better than the Jim Crow Army. Don't join the Jim Crow Army. We demand an executive order outlawing military segregation. So African Americans are saying, yeah, we'll serve, but don't think we're serving in that army that you think we're going to serve in. Because we're going to fight for democracy. We want democracy. Now for the Japanese, things are a little different. And I'll finish on this slide, I promise. For the Japanese, after Pearl Harbor, FDR passes Executive Order 9066, which authorizes the removal of all Japanese people from the Western United States. They are then put into internment camps for the duration of the war. They protest this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says in Korematsu versus the U.S., yep, too bad. That sucks. But it's a war, so stay in your camps. Establishing this precedent that it's okay to put people in camps when there is a war and there is a threat. The fear is this. Another Dr. Seuss cartoon, but a slightly more racist one than what you saw before. All these Japanese people, what are they coming to get? Jobs, yes, no. Bombs. They're coming to get TNT, and they're waiting for the signal from home. The fear is the Japanese are going to invade the U.S., and then all these Japanese Americans are going to rise up and join them because they're more loyal to Japan than they are to the U.S. The solution? Put them in camps. Families are given 1 week to close their businesses, to try to sell their homes, because after that, their homes are gone, their businesses are gone, and of course, they're selling their stuff for way cheaper than they could have otherwise, their homes and businesses included, because they have to. They're packed up, and they are sent to camps like Manzanar in Central California. I suggest going at some point in your life. It's worth seeing. Now it's a museum. As far east as Colorado, 2 in Arizona. If they're in this area, they are sent away. That's what the camps look like. And I'll talk about the Mexican Americans and the Native Americans tomorrow. Cool. So have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.